The night had fallen heavy over Raven Hollow when former Army Sergeant Jack Hunter turned down the icy road near the freight yard, and his headlights caught a scene straight out of hell. A man named Vince Doran, known for breaking bones and taking orders from crime lord Maxwell Crane, was beating a pregnant German shepherd chained to a rusted fence, shouting, "You're no good to me now!" Snow darkened beneath her trembling paws, her cries lost in the wind, until Jack slammed his truck door open and charged forward. He didn't know it yet, but that single act of defiance would unravel a conspiracy, test the limits of his faith, and prove that even in a world gone cold, God still sends miracles in fur and loyalty. What happened next will make you cry and remind you that redemption sometimes wears a soldier's scars and a dog's courage. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. If you believe that kindness still has power and that miracles walk among us in pause and faith, then hit like, share this story, and subscribe to our channel. Together, we'll keep spreading hope, compassion, and the light of God's grace, one story at a time. May God bless you and your family today and always. Winter in Raven Hollow had a quiet way of creeping into the bones. The air was thin and dry, the kind that carried the faint metallic scent of cold iron and faraway chimneys. On the city's edge, where warehouses hunched like sleeping beasts and the snow on the asphalt was streaked gray by passing tires, Jack Hunter drove his rusted Ford pickup with the slow patience of a man who had nowhere particular to be. Jack, 42, carried the weight of 15 years in the U.S. Army on his shoulders. His frame was solid, not bulky but compact, like something carved for endurance. A short beard darkened his jawline, streaked with early silver. His brown eyes, once sharp and decisive, now had a dulled, watchful calm, the gaze of someone who had seen too much and learned to say little about it. Scars, not all visible, mapped the corners of his hands and his thoughts. Since leaving the service, he worked odd security jobs, kept his distance, and spoke more to silence than to people. That afternoon, the sky was the color of pewter. The radio murmured static. Jack's mind wandered to nothing in particular until he saw movement near a rusted chain-link fence by the old mill road. A small figure darted, another loomed, and something alive whimpered. He eased his truck to the curb, engine idling low, and what he saw snapped him out of his fog. A man was kicking a dog, not just any dog, a German shepherd, female, ribs showing through her dull tan and black coat, sides swelling with the unmistakable weight of pregnancy. She struggled to rise, slipping on ice, while a boy, maybe 10, knelt beside the fence, crying, "Stop, please!" His voice cracked from cold and terror. The man, Vince Doran, was in his 30s, but looked older in the hard light. He had the kind of lean, restless frame that never stood still, a narrow face with a long nose and a day's worth of stubble that only made his sneer more cutting. His black hair was slicked back beneath a cheap leather cap, and his heavy coat looked military surplus, but carried no honor. There was something in his posture, sharp, coiled, that screamed of violence turned into habit. He gripped a length of chain in one gloved hand, swinging it lazily as he barked, "You think you can run from me, mutt? My boss paid for you. You don't get to run." The dog whimpered again, pressing herself against the frozen fence, her belly trembling. The boy's small hands clutched the wire. Jack felt something inside him twitch. An old reflex from dusty roads overseas, from the sound of someone smaller calling out for help. His heart, trained long ago to measure risk before emotion, now betrayed him. Before he even realized it, he was out of the truck. "Hey!" His voice came out deeper than he expected, roughened by months of disuse. Vince turned, chain still in hand. "Back off, old man. This ain't your business." Jack stepped closer, steady, shoulders square. "Doesn't look like business to me. Looks like you're beating a pregnant dog." "Pregnant dog belongs to my boss," Vince snapped. "She bit me, tried to run. I'm just teaching her." His tone shifted into a smirk. "You a cop or something?" Jack stopped 3 feet away. Not anymore. The chain flicked. The dog yelped. That sound, sharp, helpless, cut through every wall Jack had built around his conscience. He reached forward, grabbed the chain mid-swing. Vince tried to pull it back, but Jack's grip was iron. The younger man swung with his other hand, catching Jack on the shoulder, but the veteran moved with a precision learned from years of training. A twist, a pull, a sudden shift of balance, and Vince was face first in the snow, breath knocked out of him. "Enough," Jack growled. Vince spat blood into the slush. "You're making a big mistake." Jack's jaw tightened. "Already made plenty." He tossed the chain aside. "Now get out of here before you make another." Vince stood slowly, eyes narrow and calculating. He brushed snow from his coat, revealing a glimpse of a pistol holster at his side. Empty, but the threat was clear. "You'll regret this," he muttered, backing away toward a dented gray pickup parked down the road. "You don't know who you're crossing." Jack didn't answer. He stood there until the truck's tail lights disappeared into the haze. The silence afterward was heavier than the cold. The dog lay trembling, chest heaving, her fur matted with dirt and old bruises. The boy still knelt beside her, his tears freezing at the corners of his eyes. Jack crouched down, voice softer now. "She yours?" The boy nodded, wiping his face with the back of his sleeve. "She was my dad's. He's gone." Jack hesitated. The boy's voice carried something that twisted in his gut, grief that felt too familiar. "What's your name?" "Eli," the boy whispered, "and her name's Maya. Please, don't let him take her again." Jack looked at the dog. Maya's eyes, a deep amber flecked with fear and defiance, met his. There was intelligence there, and exhaustion. She shifted slightly, letting out a low whine. Jack could see she was near term. Every breath came slow and heavy. "Can you stand?" he asked, more to himself than to her. Carefully he slid his arms beneath her torso. She didn't resist, just trembled, too weak to fight, but trusting enough not to bite. He carried her to his truck, laid her gently on the back seat, then turned to Eli. "Get in. It's too cold to stay here." Eli hesitated, looking down the road where Vince had gone. "He'll come back." Jack's voice was calm, but firm. "Not tonight." Inside the truck, the heater wheezed to life. The cab filled with the faint scent of wet fur and rust. Eli sat silently, hands clasped, glancing at Maya every few seconds as though making sure she was still breathing. Jack drove toward Zoar, the apartment complex on the east side of town. Low concrete buildings painted the color of rain. When they arrived, he led them up the narrow stairway. His apartment was sparse. One couch, a coffee table, a stack of old photographs turned face down on a shelf. He laid Maya on a blanket near the radiator. The warmth made her twitch, then sigh, a sound that somehow felt like relief. Eli crouched beside her, stroking her head gently. "She was with my dad since I was little," he murmured. "He used to say she understood everything." Jack poured hot water into a mug, added 2 spoons of instant coffee, and handed the boy a glass of milk instead. "You got family here?" Eli shook his head. "No, it's just us." Jack leaned against the counter, watching the boy and the dog. Something about them, the fragility, the bond, carved through the dullness that had lived in him for years. He remembered another winter, another stray, a checkpoint in a desert far from here. His chest tightened. When Maya opened her eyes again, they met his across the dim room. There was fear still, but also something else, a kind of questioning trust. Jack knelt, resting a hand just above her paw. "You're safe now," he said quietly, though the words felt heavier than they should. "I'll make sure of it." The boy looked up. "You mean it?" Jack nodded. "Yeah, but first thing tomorrow, we'll get her checked by a vet. She needs help." "Thank you," Eli whispered. Jack turned away, hiding the flicker of emotion that crossed his face. He didn't know why he was doing this. Maybe because he'd seen enough helplessness to last a lifetime. Maybe because that dog's eyes had the same look as the men he'd failed to save. Or maybe, and he hated to admit it, because he needed something, someone, to believe in him again. Outside, Raven Hollow's streetlights flickered through the frost, and the world settled into its cold rhythm once more. Inside the small apartment, the silence was broken only by the slow breathing of a wounded dog and the quiet sobs of a boy who finally, for one night, felt safe. Jack sat by the window long after they'd fallen asleep, watching the city's smoke drift across the moon. He didn't know it yet, but this simple act, pulling over, stepping out, had already changed everything. The morning came pale and slow, leaking through the blinds like a ghost reluctant to enter. The room smelled faintly of damp fur, cheap coffee, and the smoke of last night's small fire. Jack Hunter sat at the table, hands clasped around a chipped mug, eyes fixed on the steam as if it held answers. Across the room, Eli lay curled on the couch under an old military blanket, his hair messy, and his small frame half buried in fabric. Maya, the German shepherd, rested near the radiator. Her breathing had steadied, though every few moments she let out a low whine, as if her dreams were still full of fear. Jack had not slept. The image of the man from last night, Vince Doran, kept replaying in his mind. The eyes of a predator, the chain, the sound of it cutting through cold air. Jack had seen men like him before in war, men who hid cruelty behind orders or greed. He rubbed the scar on his left hand, the one that ran from his thumb to the base of his wrist, a reminder of the day he tried to save a civilian convoy overseas and failed. That old guilt, once dull, stirred again. When Eli woke, blinking against the gray light, he looked immediately for Maya. Seeing her alive, his shoulders relaxed. "She's okay," he whispered, then added shyly, "Thank you, sir." Jack shook his head. "Don't call me sir. I'm not that anymore. Name's Jack." "Okay, Jack." Eli's voice was small but clear. He reached out to stroke Maya's neck. "She's my best friend, my dad. He said she was family." Jack poured the boy a bowl of cereal and sat across from him. "You said your dad worked for someone last night. Who was it?" Eli hesitated, eyes down. "His name was Maxwell Crane. He owned trucks, lots of them. Dad drove shipments. He thought it was animal food and medicine. But one day he came home scared. Said there were guns in the crates, and that the company wasn't real." Jack leaned back, the chair creaking beneath his weight. The name Crane stirred something faint in his memory, a whisper he'd overheard once in a security briefing back when he still worked private contracts. He couldn't place it, but it felt dirty. "What happened to your father?" Eli's lip trembled. "He called the police. A week later, he didn't come home. They found his truck in the river. No one cared." Silence filled the room. Jack swallowed hard. The boy's words had a simple truth to them, too raw to be rehearsed. After breakfast, Jack turned his attention to Maya. He crouched beside her, running a hand over her fur. She flinched slightly at first, then leaned into his touch. There were bruises along her ribs, old cuts half-healed, and a small piece of metal tucked into the seam of her collar. Jack frowned, prying it loose with a pocket knife. It was a thin steel tag, worn smooth, with a sequence of engraved numbers and letters, K9 FED 1176. He stared at it. "You were a government property once, weren't you?" he murmured. The thought made something click into place. The discipline in the dog's eyes, the way she didn't cower, but observed, cautious yet calculating. Eli looked up. "What does it mean?" "It means she wasn't just a pet," Jack said. "She was trained. Somebody took her from a program that should have protected her." Maya shifted, resting her head on Eli's lap. Her amber eyes flicked between the two of them. She was lean, a little underfed, but her bones showed the build of a true working dog. Strong shoulders, broad chest, paws like carved stone. She couldn't have been older than 6, yet there was a weary wisdom in her gaze, as if she'd seen both the best and worst of people. Jack wrapped the tag in a piece of tissue and pocketed it. "We'll get her checked out. There's a vet in town I know." They bundled into the truck again. The city looked half asleep beneath a white sky, every building softened by frost. Raven Hollow wasn't large, just a handful of streets, a river cutting through its industrial heart, and a population that had long ago stopped expecting miracles. The veterinary clinic sat on the corner of Maple and 7th in a building with faded green paint and a wooden sign that read, "Monroe Animal Care." The bell above the door chimed as they entered, and the scent of antiseptic and fur replaced the city air. Behind the counter stood Dr. Clara Monroe, a woman in her late 30s with steady hands and sharp, intelligent eyes. She was tall, slim, with sun-browned skin and short auburn hair streaked lighter from years under field tents. A thin scar traced her right temple, a souvenir from her time as an Army medic in Iraq. Jack hadn't seen her in years, but her presence was as grounded as he remembered. "Jack Hunter," she said, recognition flickering across her face. "I thought you disappeared." "Almost did," Jack replied. "Got something that needs help." Clara's gaze dropped to Maya, then to Eli. "That's quite a pair you've got there. What happened?" "Found them last night. She's pregnant, beaten. Kid says her owner works for Maxwell Crane." Clara's eyebrows tightened. "Crane Industries? I've treated animals from their transports. They never stay long. Always paperwork problems, IDs that don't match. You should have called animal control." "I don't trust them," Jack said simply. "You can look at her." Clara sighed, gesturing to the exam room. "Bring her in." Eli followed anxiously, holding Maya's leash. The clinic's light was warm, reflecting off the metal instruments and jars of medicine. Clara worked quietly, her movements efficient but gentle. She checked Maya's heartbeat, eyes, paws, and abdomen. "She's due soon," she murmured. "Maybe a week. She's malnourished but strong. Whoever trained her did it right." Jack leaned against the counter. "You think she's one of the federal, K-9s?" Clara looked up sharply. "What makes you say that?" Jack handed her the tag. She studied it, then exhaled. "Yeah, that's a federal canine unit identifier. These dogs are microchipped and tracked. But this tag, someone tried to grind off the logo. They didn't want her traced." Eli's eyes widened. "Can they find us?" Clara shook her head. "Not unless the chip's still active. I can scan it." She fetched a small reader from the shelf and passed it gently along Maya's neck. The device beeped once, showing faint numbers on its screen. Clara frowned. "This chip's been tampered with. They cut the transmitter, left only the ID. Someone knew what they were doing." Jack crossed his arms. "So Crane's people are stealing government dogs and using them for transport. That's what you're saying?" "I'm saying it's possible," Clara replied. "But proving it would take more than one chip. You should leave this to the feds." "I've left too many things to the feds," Jack muttered. Clara studied him for a long moment. "You still carry it, don't you? The guilt." He didn't answer. She smiled sadly. "You can't save everyone, Jack. But maybe you can save this one." He looked at Eli, who was stroking Maya's head softly. The boy's small hands trembled with quiet hope. "Yeah," Jack said at last. "Maybe I can." Clara gave him a small vial of antibiotics and instructions for care. Keep her warm. Don't let her climb stairs. And if that man, Vince, shows up again, call me first, not the police. When they left the clinic, the light was fading. The streets shimmered with thin ice. Jack started the truck and sat for a moment, watching the breath of the boy and the dog cloud the windows. The metal tag in his pocket felt heavier now, like a key to something he wasn't sure he wanted to unlock. As they drove home, Eli whispered, "Do you think they'll come for her again?" Jack kept his eyes on the road. "If they do, they'll have to go through me first." Maya lifted her head slightly at the sound of his voice, ears pricking as if she understood. The truck rumbled through the quiet streets of Raven Hollow, 3 lives bound together by chance, and a secret waiting in the dark to be found. That night Jack sat by the small window, watching the streetlight flicker through the frost. Eli had fallen asleep on the couch, and Maya lay curled at his feet, her breathing deep and even. The city outside was silent, but Jack's thoughts were not. Somewhere out there, the man named Maxwell Crane was still free, and the tag in his pocket felt heavier with every passing hour. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, only that he couldn't walk away now. By the next evening, the world outside had turned to shades of pewter and charcoal, the kind of winter dusk that blurred the horizon into smoke. Jack Hunter stood at his kitchen counter, staring at the small steel tag he'd pried from Maya's collar the day before. The engraving caught the dim light, K9 Fed 1176, and something about it gnawed at him. A code like that didn't belong to a house pet. It belonged to a file, a handler, a history buried deep. Maya lay near the radiator, her chest rising in slow, even breaths. Eli sat cross-legged beside her, sketching clumsy pictures in a notebook Jack had given him. The boy's lines were uncertain, an outline of Maya, a man with a cap, a pickup truck. But the effort spoke of hope, fragile but stubborn. Jack's phone buzzed on the counter, its cracked screen lighting up with a name he hadn't seen in years. Tom Grady. The old friend had once been a sergeant in the Raven Hollow Police Department, now retired after 30 years. Tom was the kind of man who never quit investigating, even when no one was paying him to. Jack answered with a gruff, "Hunter." "Still got that same voice," Tom said, his tone warm and gravelly. "Clara called. Told me about the dog. You really know how to pick trouble, don't you?" Jack glanced at Maya. "It found me, not the other way around." Tom chuckled softly. "That's what you said the last time we ended up in the ER. Listen, I ran the tag number you mentioned. Couldn't access the federal archives, but I found an old record from a subcontractor in Denver, some logistics outfit called Kestrel Freight. Used to move equipment for defense contractors. Went under 5 years ago." Jack frowned. "Defense gear?" "Yeah, the weird part? Kestrel's assets were bought by Crane Industries 6 months later." That name again, Maxwell Crane. The chill in Jack's chest deepened. "So they took over everything, including the dogs?" "Looks like it. Jack, whatever you're into, stay out of Crane's way. The man's connected to every politician and investor between here and the coast. Even the local cops don't touch him." Jack gave a dry laugh. "You ever known me to listen?" "Yeah," Tom said quietly. "That's what scares me." They ended the call. Jack pocketed his phone, eyes narrowing as he pieced together what he knew. A dead truck driver, a stolen federal dog, and a company pretending to ship animal supplies. It wasn't random cruelty. It was structure, system. Later that night, he sat by the window, the city's cold lights flickering on the glass. He turned the tag over in his hand, tracing the letters with his thumb. Maya shifted, her ears flicking toward him. "You were part of something once. weren't you?" he murmured. "Something real." Her eyes met his, amber, steady, and far older than they should have been. He wondered what she'd seen before ending up in a cage under Vince Doran's chain. The next morning, Jack took Maya and Eli back to Dr. Clara Monroe's clinic. The snow had stopped, leaving the streets slick and shining. Clara met them at the door, her expression already serious. She wore a wool coat over her scrubs, auburn hair tied back, the faint line of the scar near her temple catching the light. "I stayed up half the night digging," she said. "You're not going to like what I found." Jack followed her inside, Maya padding beside him. Eli trailed behind, holding onto the leash. Clara led them into her office, where her laptop screen showed a list of data entries. "These are archived procurement logs from the Federal Canine Unit. Your dog, Maya, according to this, was designated Canine 176, assigned to a handler named Officer Daniel Royce, Denver PD. Official record, both killed during a raid 3 years ago." Jack frowned. "Killed? She's standing right here." "Exactly, which means someone faked that record," Clara said. "After the unit was dissolved, a private contractor bought several dogs. One of those contractors was Crane Industries." Eli's face went pale. "So they lied? They said my dad's route was legal." Clara placed a hand on his shoulder. "They lied to everyone, sweetheart." Jack straightened. "You still have connections in the military databases?" Clara hesitated, then nodded. "A few, but I could lose my license if I dig too far." "I just need confirmation," Jack said. "Whoever's stealing these dogs isn't doing it alone. There's paperwork, transport routes. I'll handle the rest." Clara studied him. "You've got that look again, the one from Kandahar. Don't make me stitch you up twice in one lifetime." He gave a half smile. "No promises." As they left, Jack noticed a black sedan parked across the street. 2 men sat inside, windows fogged, engine idling. He felt the weight of old instincts press down. Watchers, not random. He said nothing to Eli, just started the truck and drove the long way home, taking back roads lined with frost-bitten trees. By midday, they stopped at a diner off Route 5. It was nearly empty except for a waitress with kind eyes and a cook reading yesterday's newspaper. Jack ordered coffee for himself, soup for Eli, and water for Maya. The waitress, Lorna, a woman in her 50s with short gray hair and a face soft from years of small-town kindness, looked at the dog and said, "Poor thing, looks like she's been through hell." Jack nodded. "Haven't we all?" As they ate, Jack unfolded a napkin and wrote down everything he knew: names, routes, connections. He thought about the fake death report, about Crane Industries absorbing defense contracts. The pieces formed a shape that looked too deliberate to be coincidence. When they returned home that evening, he caught movement near his building, a man leaning against the stair rail, pretending to smoke. The face was unfamiliar. Mid-30s, sharp jaw, shaved head. His eyes followed Jack a little too long. Jack didn't confront him. Not yet. He unlocked the door, ushered Eli and Maya inside, and slid the bolt shut. That night, the dreams came back, the firefight in the desert, the explosion, the flash of a dog barking before the world went white. He woke in sweat, the sound of Eli murmuring softly in his sleep beside the couch. Maya was awake too, ears pricked, staring toward the window. Jack rose, silent, and pulled the curtain aside. Across the street, under the dull orange glow of a street lamp, the same black sedan sat again, engine humming. He whispered, "They found us." The following morning, he called Tom Grady. "I need a name. Someone inside Crane's company who handles shipments." Tom hesitated. "There's a guy named Ralph Kinney, used to work maintenance at their storage facility near the rail yard. Got fired 2 months ago. Drunk most days, but still talks too much. You might find him at Murphy's Tavern." Jack nodded. "Appreciate it." Murphy's was a dim bar on the south side, where daylight died as soon as the door closed. The air smelled of beer, old smoke, and resignation. Jack found Ralph Kinney slumped over a counter, thick-bodied and red-faced, with thinning blonde hair and a permanent squint. His plaid shirt was stained, and his hands bore the rough calluses of years with machines. Jack slid into the seat beside him. "You worked for Crane Industries?" Ralph blinked, suspicious. "Who's asking?" "Someone who doesn't like people being buried for knowing too much," Ralph laughed bitterly. "Then you're already late. They clean up nice. Dogs, drivers, paperwork, gone like it never happened." He took a swig of whiskey. "Crates marked as vet supplies. Inside you got rifles, drugs, whatever pays best that week. I fixed the refrigeration units. Didn't know what was inside until one fell open. Saw a dog in there, breathing through a mask. It looked just like yours." Jack felt his jaw tighten. "Where's the facility?" "Off the rail yard, Gate 9. But you didn't hear that from me." Jack left a 20 on the counter and walked out into the cold. The snow had started again, small and soundless. Somewhere behind him, Maya barked once from the truck, as if sensing what he'd learned. That night, as Jack drove back through the quiet streets of Raven Hollow, he finally understood. The dog, the boy, the death of Eli's father, they were all threads of the same dark weave, and he was already entangled. He reached over to pat Maya's head. "We're not running any more," he said softly. "Not this time." Maya's tail thumped once against the seat, a small, steady answer in the long silence. The fog rolled in from the harbor that night, thick and slow, swallowing the edges of the Raven Hollow docks until the warehouses looked like hulking shadows on a ghostly sea. Jack Hunter crouched behind a line of rusted shipping containers, the damp cold crawling into his knees. The sodium lights buzzed overhead, painting the scene in yellow-gray streaks. From where he hid, he could see a wide metal structure marked Crane Logistics, authorized access only. Trucks idled outside, their taillights pulsing red through the mist. He raised his camera, a small black DSLR borrowed from Tom Grady, and zoomed in on the loading bay. Men moved like clockwork, carrying wooden crates stamped with animal transport labels. But even from here, Jack could tell the boxes were too small for livestock and too heavy for feed. The rhythmic clang of pallets echoed against the steel walls. His breath slowed. He pressed the shutter, once, twice, 3 times. Through the lens, a face emerged. Vince Doran. The man wore a leather jacket, his dark hair damp from fog. He was barking orders to the workers, one hand wrapped around a clipboard, the other resting on the pistol holstered at his hip. There was something sharp in his movements, a coiled violence that came from believing he was untouchable. Jack steadied his camera for another shot. Then a voice cut through the noise. "Hey, you there!" He turned. A security guard stood 20 feet away, flashlight beams slicing the fog. The man was tall, mid-40s, with a belly straining against his jacket and a mustache like a broom. His badge read R. Kelly, Security Supervisor. Jack's instincts flared. He bolted. "Stop! Hey!" The guard's shout cracked the night. Jack sprinted between containers, boots slapping against the wet ground. A second beam of light joined the first, then a third. Shouts multiplied. He ducked behind a crate, drew in a ragged breath, and slipped his phone into his pocket. He'd gotten the pictures. He just needed to make it out. Vince's voice carried through the night. "Find him! Now!" The chase spilled into the open lot. A black pickup screeched into view. Vince behind the wheel, headlights blinding. Jack dove behind a forklift as the truck roared past, missing him by inches. He rolled, came up running. The fog thickened, swallowing the outlines of men and machines. A gunshot cracked the air. Sparks danced off a metal drum beside him. A bullet grazed his left shoulder as he ducked behind a container. The burn of it seared deep, and warm blood trickled down his arm beneath the sleeve of his jacket. Jack ducked instinctively, feeling the old rhythm return, the pulse of adrenaline that once defined his life. He darted toward the fence, but a figure lunged from the shadows. The guard, Kelly, grabbed his arm. "Gotcha, you!" Jack twisted, slamming his elbow into the man's ribs. Kelly grunted, doubling over. Jack vaulted the chain-link fence, catching his sleeve on the wire. The fabric tore, and pain lanced through his arm as a jagged edge sliced his skin. He hit the ground hard on the other side, rolled once, and stumbled to his truck. The engine coughed before catching. He floored the gas, tires squealing. Behind him, headlights flared, two vehicles giving chase. Bullets snapped through the fog, one punching through his rear window. The mirror exploded. Jack swerved left, down an industrial road lined with abandoned factories. The fog turned to smoke as he gunned the accelerator. "Come on," he muttered. The engine roared like an old war horse, straining. One of the trucks gained on him, grill flashing under the lamps. He yanked the wheel, clipping a stack of metal barrels. They scattered across the road, crashing into the pursuers. One truck spun out, but the other stayed close. Jack's mind worked fast. He remembered the river turnoff up ahead, a sharp curve ending at a slope. If he timed it right, he could disappear. He slammed the brakes, then jerked the wheel right. His truck skidded sideways, fishtailing before plunging down the embankment toward the shallow riverbank. Mud sprayed the windshield. The pursuing truck barreled past, overshooting the curve. Jack heard the screech of tires, then the crunch of metal as it slammed into a guardrail. Silence. He sat there, chest heaving, rain now tapping lightly against the glass. His shoulder burned where the cut had deepened. Slowly he drove along the river until the lights disappeared behind him. When he finally returned to his apartment, the place felt too quiet. The door was slightly ajar. Every nerve in his body went tight. He pushed it open. "Eli?" he called. No answer. The couch was overturned, the blanket on the floor. The radiator hummed softly, still warm. A bowl of water lay spilled beside Maya's empty bed. His stomach dropped. On the wall, in red marker, someone had written a single word: "Stop." His phone vibrated in his pocket. Unknown number. He answered. Vince's voice, low and smug, filled the silence. "You should have listened, soldier. You think you can play hero again? They're both alive, for now. But every hour you keep digging, that changes." Jack gripped the phone so tight his knuckles whitened. "If you hurt them—" "Don't finish that sentence," Vince interrupted. "You want them back. You'll stay out of Crane's business. This isn't war anymore, Hunter. There's no flag to hide behind." The line clicked dead. Jack stood motionless for a long moment. Then he lowered the phone, his expression turning to stone. The quiet hum of the radiator filled the room, mocking him. He looked around, the shattered lamp, the small shoe lying by the couch, the faint paw prints near the door. He sank to one knee and touched the floor. It was still damp. They hadn't been gone long. He closed his eyes. In his head he heard the echo of old voices, his commanding officer's words from years ago. Sometimes survival isn't enough. Sometimes you fight because you can't stand not to. When he stood again, his decision was already made. He opened the closet, pulled out a locked metal case, and set it on the table. The latches snapped open, revealing a 9mm pistol, a combat knife, and a folded map of the Raven Hollow docks. He checked the weapon with steady hands, loaded a full magazine, and slipped it into the holster beneath his jacket. The soldier was back. Outside, the fog had thickened again, coiling around the streetlights like smoke from a long-forgotten fire. Jack stepped into it, eyes hard, jaw set. Somewhere out there, a boy and a dog waited in the dark. And this time, he wasn't coming to negotiate. The night after the abduction, Raven Hollow seemed to hold its breath. The snow had frozen into a thin, brittle crust that cracked beneath every step. Jack Hunter moved through the back streets, his brown Carhartt jacket pulled tight against the cold, his eyes burning with the kind of focus only men with nothing left to lose carried. He'd been tracking the same dark sedan for hours, hoping it would lead him to Vince Doran or the boy and the dog he'd taken. But by midnight, the trail went cold. He stopped under the flickering neon of a 24-hour gas station, took out his phone, and called Tom Grady. The old detective answered on the second ring, his voice gravelly from years of cigarettes and bourbon. "I figured I'd hear from you tonight," Tom said. "How bad is it?" "They took the boy and the dog," Jack replied flatly. "Vince called. He's working for Crane. I'm done waiting." Tom exhaled slowly, as if weighing the gravity of the words. "Come by my place. I've still got files from the old investigation." Tom lived on the north end of town in a single-story house, wedged between an abandoned library and a shuttered diner. When Jack arrived, the living room lights glowed dimly behind lace curtains. Inside, the place smelled of old coffee, gun oil, and faded memories. Tom Grady was 60, broad-shouldered but worn down by time. His hair was silver and cut short, his face lined deeply around the eyes. A thin scar cut through his left eyebrow, a souvenir from a failed bust years ago. He wore a flannel shirt under a dark vest, his badge long retired, but his instincts still sharp. "You look worse than the last time I saw you," Tom muttered, handing Jack a cup of black coffee. "Feels about right," Jack said. "You still have access to Crane's files." Tom's lips twitched in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Access is a polite word. I've got copies. The department didn't want to touch him, so I kept what I could. Crane's clean on paper, dirty everywhere else." He crossed to an old metal filing cabinet, opened the second drawer, and pulled out a yellow folder marked Crane, Confidential. Inside were photos, receipts, and fragments of reports stamped Classified. Tom spread the documents across the table. Most of these shipments run through front companies, animal transport, construction materials, medical supply. But there's one hub that keeps showing up, an old auto repair yard off Riverbend Road. Crane's people use it as a relay point before moving crates to the northern docks. Jack's eyes hardened. That's where they're keeping Eli. Tom didn't ask how he knew. He'd seen that look before, men ready to do something reckless because it was the only thing they could live with. "You'll need backup," Tom said. "I'll call Clara. She's got a vehicle we can use and a medic's steadiness if things go south." When Clara arrived, her expression was calm, but her eyes told another story, tired, worried, but resolute. She wore a thick olive jacket and a wool cap, her auburn hair tucked neatly underneath. "You shouldn't be doing this alone," she said simply. "I'm not," Jack replied. When Clara stepped inside, the first thing she noticed was the blood on Jack's sleeve. "You didn't tell me you were hit," she said sharply. "It's nothing," he muttered. She pulled a small first aid kit from her truck bag, peeled back the torn fabric, and winced. "That's not nothing." Jack looked away as she cleaned the wound with quick, practiced hands. The sting cut deep, but her voice stayed even. "You always say that," she said quietly, "and you never mean it." He managed a faint smile. "Some things don't change." "Then let's make sure you do," she replied, finishing the bandage before meeting his eyes. "Now, tell me where they're holding the kid." By dawn, they had a plan. Tom provided the weapons, 2 pistols and a pump-action shotgun, while Clara brought medical supplies and a police scanner she'd borrowed from an old contact. The trio drove through the waking city in Tom's weathered Chevy, tires humming over cracked asphalt. The auto repair yard stood on the edge of an industrial strip surrounded by chain-link fences and half-collapsed garages. Snow blanketed the broken cars like tombstones. Jack parked a block away and killed the lights. 3 guards outside, Tom whispered through the binoculars. Vince isn't subtle. Jack checked his pistol, the metal cold against his palm. He doesn't have to be. He thinks I'm broken. They waited until the guards moved toward the rear gate for a smoke. Jack slipped through the fence, silent and low, moving with the grace of habit. Tom followed, covering the flank, while Clara stayed by the truck, scanning the police frequencies. Inside the yard, Jack crept toward the largest garage. Through a dirty window, he could make out 2 figures: Vince, pacing with his usual swagger, and Eli, tied to a chair but unharmed. Maya lay in a cage nearby, growling softly. Jack whispered into his radio, "I see them." Tom's voice crackled back. 2 more in the corner, armed. Watch your 6. Jack inhaled once, deep and steady, then slipped through the side door. The cold air smelled of oil and rust. Vince's voice cut through the silence. "You really thought you could scare Crane, huh? Ex-soldier playing hero again?" Jack stepped out of the shadows. "You talk too much, Vince." The shock on Vince's face lasted a heartbeat. Then he reached for his gun. Jack fired first. The shot rang through the garage, echoing off steel walls. One of the guards dropped. The second raised his rifle, but didn't get the chance to aim. Tom's shotgun thundered from outside, shattering the window. Vince scrambled behind a car lift, firing blind. Sparks flew as bullets struck the metal beams. Jack advanced, calm and precise, every movement honed from years of combat. He rounded the corner, disarmed Vince with a swift blow, and slammed him against the lift post. "Where are they moving the shipments?" Jack demanded. Vince spat blood, sneering. "You think Crane tells me? You're already too late." Jack pressed harder. "Try me." Vince laughed through broken teeth. "North Docks, tomorrow night. Big one. You won't make it out alive." Jack's jaw clenched. He slammed the man once more, then turned to Eli, cutting the boy's bindings. "You okay?" Eli nodded shakily, his eyes wide. "I knew you'd come." Jack opened Maya's cage. The German shepherd leapt out, limping slightly but alert. She went straight to Eli, pressing her muzzle against his chest. For a second, the boy buried his face in her fur, and the tension broke just enough for Jack to breathe. But then Clara's voice burst over the radio. "Jack! Get out! Backup's coming! Crane's men are on the move!" They didn't wait. Jack grabbed the nearest laptop on the workbench, shoving it into his pack, then guided Eli and Maya toward the back exit. Tom covered them, firing 2 warning shots at the approaching SUVs. They raced across the yard, bullets ricocheting off metal. They reached the truck, slammed the doors, and tore down the road. Behind them, the yard exploded in a burst of orange fire, Vince's handiwork, trying to erase the evidence. The blast lit the early dawn sky like a dying sun. By the time they reached Tom's house, the adrenaline had worn off, leaving only exhaustion and silence. Jack powered on the stolen laptop. The screen flickered, asking for a password. Tom grunted, "Try the USB port. Maybe there's a removable drive." Jack inserted the small flash drive he'd found taped under the keyboard. The computer unlocked to reveal rows of spreadsheets, shipment IDs, and dates. One entry caught his eye. North Docks, final transfer, 22 Hunqua. "That's tomorrow," Clara said quietly. Jack stared at the screen, his reflection ghosted across the glass. "Then that's where it ends." The northern docks of Raven Hollow stretched into the black water like the bones of some long-dead beast. Cargo cranes stood frozen against the night sky, their skeletal arms reaching into the fog. The air was thick with diesel smoke and the faint metallic taste of the sea. Jack Hunter crouched behind a stack of crates, his breath clouding in the bitter cold. The pistol in his hand felt heavier than usual, not from its weight, but from what it meant. This was it, the end of the line. He had left Eli at Clara Monroe's clinic under Tom's protection earlier that evening. The boy hadn't wanted to stay. "You'll need help," Eli had said, his voice trembling but brave. Jack had crouched to meet his eyes. "You've already done enough, kid. Keep Maya's pups safe when she has them." He didn't tell Eli that he wasn't sure either of them would live to see that moment. Now, hours later, Jack watched the movement across the dockyard. Trucks lined the pier in perfect order, their sides emblazoned with the logo Crane Industries, Veterinary Supply Chain. But even from this distance he could see the guards, too many, too armed. At the far end of the dock, the largest warehouse glowed under floodlights, casting long shadows that danced across the frozen asphalt. He touched the small earpiece connected to his radio. "Tom, you in position?" "Copy that," came Tom Grady's gravelly reply. "I've got eyes on the main gate. Looks like a dozen men, maybe more." "You sure you don't want to wait for the feds?" Jack's lips twisted into a faint smile. "We wait. They'll clean the place out. This is our only shot." "Hell," Tom muttered, "you never did like doing things the easy way." Jack adjusted the straps on his vest and checked the knife tucked into his boot. The old soldier inside him had returned, silent and sure. He began moving, low, fast, a shadow among the machinery. The rhythmic sound of the ocean masked his footsteps. Inside the warehouse, the hum of generators filled the air. Jack peered through a side window and froze. A row of metal cages stretched along the wall, each containing a dog, German Shepherds, Belgian Malinois, Labradors, all unconscious, their fur gleaming under harsh fluorescent light. The smell of antiseptic and chemical sedatives burned his throat. He pushed the door open. It creaked softly. Moving between the cages, he checked the labels. K9 1183, K9 1220, K9 1176. His stomach clenched when he saw that last number, Maya's code. She was part of the same stolen line. They were using these dogs for transport, experimentation, smuggling, whatever Crane's empire demanded. He clenched his fist, then he heard footsteps. "Looks like someone couldn't mind his own business." The voice came from the shadows. Vince Doran stepped into the light, a rifle slung over his shoulder and his usual smirk plastered across his bruised face. He looked worse than before, cut on his cheek, eyes bloodshot, a nervous tremor in his hand. But his arrogance hadn't dimmed. Behind him came 4 armed men, dressed in black tactical gear, with Crane's insignia stitched to their sleeves. Jack raised his weapon. "It's over, Vince." Vince laughed. "You think this ends here? You're one man. Crane's got half the city in his pocket. You can't shoot your way out of this." Jack's voice was cold. "Watch me, we." The warehouse erupted into chaos. The first shot tore through the air, shattering the light above. Shadows flickered as gunfire echoed between the walls. Jack ducked behind a crate, firing twice. One guard went down, the other staggered, clutching his arm. Vince yelled for his men to flank. The metallic scent of blood mixed with the smoke of burning oil. Outside, Tom's voice crackled through the earpiece. "Backup's inbound. 5 SUVs, armed. You've got 2 minutes." "Too late," Jack muttered. Then, through the haze, he saw movement, a familiar silhouette. Maya. His heart stopped. Clara had let her out. The dog was charging across the dock, her sable fur streaked with snow, her breath steaming in the cold. Clara must have realized where Jack was headed and followed. To bridge realism, add this one line. Clara's old pickup screeched to a stop near the fence. She jumped out, shouting his name, but the dog was already gone, disappearing into the smoke. "Maya, no!" Jack shouted, but she was already inside. Vince saw her too and grinned. "Well, look who joined the party." He grabbed a small figure from behind a crate. Eli. The boy's hands were bound, his face streaked with dirt and fear. Jack's gut twisted. "She followed me," Eli gasped. "I'm sorry, she broke the door." "Let him go," Jack growled. Vince aimed his rifle at the boy. "You can't protect everyone, soldier. That's what you never learned." The world narrowed to that moment. The boy, the dog, the gun. Then, before Jack could move, Maya lunged. Her body collided with Vince's just as the rifle went off. The sound cracked like thunder. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. Vince staggered back, the gun clattering to the floor. Maya whimpered once, collapsing against the concrete. Jack's chest seized as he rushed forward. Vince tried to raise his weapon again, but Jack's fury was silent and absolute. He drove forward, disarming him with a brutal twist and landing a punch that sent the man crashing into a pile of crates. "You don't get to hurt them anymore," Jack said, voice raw. Vince spat blood and sneered. "You think killing me will stop Crane?" "No," Jack said, raising the pistol, "but it's a start." He fired once. The shot echoed across the warehouse. Vince fell still. Tom burst through the side door. Seconds later, shotgun raised, eyes scanning the chaos. "Jesus, Jack, what the hell happened?" Jack knelt beside Maya. She was breathing, shallow, but alive. Crimson streak stained her fur near the shoulder. "We need Clara, now." "I'm here," Clara's voice rang from the doorway. She ran to them, medical kit in hand, face pale beneath the flickering light. Her movements were steady, even as tears welled in her eyes. "Hold her still." She worked quickly, wrapping the wound, injecting a mild sedative. Outside, sirens wailed, the sound of approaching federal vehicles. The night blazed orange as one of the fuel lines ignited, flames licking up the side of the warehouse. "Time to go," Tom shouted. Jack carried Maya in his arms, Eli clutching his sleeve. They fled through the smoke, the world behind them collapsing into fire. As they reached the pier, the first SUV exploded, sending shards of metal raining into the sea. By the time they reached safety, dawn was breaking. Snow fell again, soft and silent, as if the world were trying to erase what had happened. Maya lay wrapped in Clara's coat inside the truck, her breathing steady. Jack sat beside her, his hands trembling, not from fear, but from relief. A few hours later, federal agents raided the docks. The data from the flash drive Tom handed over was enough to bring down Maxwell Crane and his entire operation. By sunrise, the news was everywhere. Crane Industries exposed in national smuggling ring. Back at Clara's clinic, warmth filled the room once more. Jack watched as Maya stirred, her eyes fluttering open. And then, to everyone's quiet disbelief, she gave a soft cry. And 3 small, wet, trembling pups came into the world. Eli laughed through tears, whispering, "She waited for you." Jack looked down at the tiny, fragile lives nestled against their mother's side and felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. The fire had taken nearly everything, but it had also given something back. 3 months passed, and Raven Hollow exhaled as if awakening from a long nightmare. Winter had softened. The sharp bite of frost now carried the gentler scent of pine and smoke. Snow still dusted the rooftops, but the streets no longer echoed with sirens or gunfire. The city, once bruised by greed and violence, had learned to breathe again. Jack Hunter stood outside the newly painted gates of an old mill lot on the outskirts of town. Where rusted fences once leaned and weeds crawled, now stood a wide wooden sign carved by hand, Raven Hollow Rescue and Training Center. Below it, a smaller plaque read, "Second Chance Lives Here." The morning light caught the words like gold. Jack had changed. He still wore the same brown work jacket, its seams weathered by time, but the lines on his face had softened. His beard, streaked with gray, framed a quieter strength, a man who had finally laid his ghosts to rest. He looked down at Maya, now strong and gleaming, her sable fur rich in color, the faint scar on her shoulder barely visible beneath the coat. She walked with a calm dignity, her instincts sharper than ever, but her eyes full of peace. Near the training yard, Eli was tossing a ball toward 3 rambunctious pups, Maya's offspring, each one a mirror of her in spirit, if not in color. The biggest, a dark male named Ranger, barked proudly. The smallest, a shy tan female called Hope, stayed close to Eli's leg. And the middle one, a curious boy with one black ear named Scout, chased shadows in the snow. Their laughter, Eli's and the pups, was the kind of sound that stitched broken things back together. Inside the building, Clara Monroe moved between kennels, clipboard in hand. Her auburn hair was tied up in a loose bun, a few strands falling against her face. She wore a dark green ranger's coat over her scrubs, boots still muddy from the morning walk. Clara had always been steady, practical, but there was warmth in her now, a light that came from finally seeing something healed rather than lost. She waved when she noticed Jack standing by the fence. "Hard to believe it's the same place," she said, walking over. "Yeah," Jack replied, his gaze sweeping the yard. "Last time I saw this much wire and concrete, it wasn't for anything good." Clara smiled faintly. "Well, this time, it's for second chances. You did that, Jack." He shook his head. "We did." From behind them came the gruff sound of Tom Grady, now walking with a cane, but still as solid as ever. He wore his old police jacket, the badge patch faded and the zipper half broken, but his eyes carried the contentment of a man who'd seen justice finally hold. "You two planning on getting sentimental, or are we cutting the ribbon today?" he called out. Jack chuckled. "You sure you're cleared for duty, old man?" Tom tapped the cane against the ground. "I'm retired, not dead." They laughed together, the easy kind of laughter that comes when fear is finally behind you. The courtyard filled quickly. Neighbors from around town came to watch the opening ceremony. Some had lost pets during the chaos of the crane case. Others had come out of curiosity or gratitude. The snow crunched under boots, the air full of soft chatter. Among them was a woman named Martha Hayes, the mayor of Raven Hollow, a sturdy woman in her 50s, tall and broad-shouldered, with salt and pepper hair tied back and sharp gray eyes softened by warmth. She'd been one of the few city officials unafraid to push for Crane's prosecution. "Jack Hunter," she said as she approached, shaking his hand firmly. "When they told me a former soldier, a vet, and a dog took down half a smuggling ring, I didn't believe it. Now I do." Jack smiled politely. "Would have rather stayed out of the papers." "Heroes never get that choice," Martha said. Then, turning to the crowd, she began her short speech. "This city has seen enough loss, enough betrayal. But sometimes hope comes in unexpected forms. A wounded dog, a frightened boy, and a man who thought his fight was over. Today, thanks to them, we open not a monument, but a beginning." Applause rippled through the audience, muted by gloves and cold air. Maya barked once as if approving, and Eli grinned proudly beside her. Jack felt something warm stir in his chest. After the ribbon was cut, the visitors toured the facility. Inside were new kennels built with funds from donations and volunteers, each labeled with names instead of numbers. There were small training fields where dogs learned obedience and rescue work, and a modest clinic where Clara treated strays brought in from the streets. Jack moved among the guests quietly, answering questions, helping children pet the puppies. At one point, Eli tugged on his sleeve. "Jack," the boy said softly, "when you go out there again to train the dogs or help people, can I come?" Jack knelt, meeting his eyes. "You're part of this now, Eli. You and Maya built it as much as I did." Eli smiled, a shy, genuine smile that reminded Jack of something he hadn't known he missed: fatherhood. The word still felt strange, but when the boy called him Dad later that day, it didn't sound wrong anymore. It sounded right. As dusk fell, the crowd thinned. Snowflakes began to drift down again, gentle and silent. Jack stood by the gate, watching the orange glow of lanterns flicker across the yard. Maya lay nearby, her pups curled against her belly, their tiny breaths making small puffs of mist. Clara joined him, holding 2 steaming mugs of coffee. "Hard to believe 3 months ago this place was ash and gunfire," she said quietly. Jack nodded. "And now it's life. Maybe that's what we were fighting for all along. Not to destroy," Clara added, finishing his thought, "but to protect what's worth saving." Jack's gaze softened. "Yeah, this time we fight to keep something alive." Across the yard, Tom locked up the office lights, grumbling about arthritis. The mayor's car disappeared down the road, tires crunching over snow. The world felt smaller, quieter, safe. Jack looked down at the sign again, its carved letters glowing faintly under the lamp. "Second chance lives here." He brushed the snow off the top and exhaled. When he turned, Maya lifted her head, eyes reflecting the soft amber light. She wagged her tail once, and he smiled. "You earned your rest, girl." The wind carried the scent of pine and new beginnings. Somewhere beyond the trees, a train horn sounded faintly. Life moving forward. Jack closed the gate, the sound echoing like punctuation at the end of a long, hard story. Above him, the first stars pierced the fading daylight, cold but clear. Raven Hollow slept beneath them, no longer a place of ghosts, but of hope. When the flames faded and dawn touched the snow, Jack realized that sometimes miracles don't come with thunder or light. They come quietly, in the form of a heartbeat that refuses to stop, a loyal dog that still breathes, or a child who believes you'll return. Maybe that's how God works. Not through grand gestures, but through the small mercies that keep us standing, the courage to forgive, the strength to try again, the faith to see the light, even in the darkest night. If you've ever lost something and found hope again, you've already seen His hand at work. Share this story if you believe that no life, no soul, is ever too broken for redemption. May God bless you and your loved ones. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel, so together we can keep spreading faith, kindness, and second chances to everyone who needs them. And don't forget to leave a comment below. Where have you seen a small miracle in your own life?